Well, we can speak now to Casey Adams. He runs a podcast and interviewed Larry recently when he was just 19. He is in Los Angeles. Thanks so much for coming on the program.
Thank you so much for having me. It's my pleasure.
So, Larry, as so many just will know him just by his first name, an absolute institution. We used to watching him ask the questions, of course. You had him on a podcast where he was answering the questions. What was that like?
Yeah, it was honestly such a pleasure. I've had a podcast for the past 3 years and I've interviewed hundreds of entrepreneurs, but my interview with Larry King was so special to me because we took 45 minutes and he was just coming off of his stroke back in 2019. And I just remember sitting down with him, and when the cameras turned on, he was so sharp. But most importantly, before the podcast, he was curious about me. He was asking me questions about what I was working on and my goals in the broadcasting world. And most importantly, he genuinely cared about our conversation. And it was one of the most impactful conversations about his legacy, about him being a father, advice to young entrepreneurs, and just the fact that he took the time of day to sit down with me, this 19-year-old kid from Virginia that has a podcast, was not only inspirational, but something that deeply impacted my life moving forward.
I'm sure. And this is someone who's obviously been around for decades and decades before you were born. You can't have seen a lot of his stuff. So what is it that you admire about him?
Yeah, I would say, anyone watching this knows Larry King, and even my generation. I'm 20 years old right now, and growing up, you would always see and hear about Larry King. And, he was born in 1933. I was born in the year 2000, and we have a 67-year age gap. And I think one of the most impressive things that I learned from him was what he talked about when it comes to his quote. It says, "I've never learned anything while I was talking." And he talked about the value of listening and having curiosity into every conversation that you are in. And that has been something that long before I ever met Larry, he was a mentor to me and someone that I looked up to as a 17-year-old kid starting a podcast, doing interviews. And I took that principle early on when it comes to writing down no questions, leading each conversation with curiosity, and most importantly, listening to the person you're talking to. And it's led me to not only hundreds of interviews, but it led me to meeting and having Larry King on my show. And like I said, it was not only a pleasure, but a lesson that I'll always remember.
And it's something that he made look so easy, the lack of preparation, the not preparing too much, being in the moment. But of course, many people have done that through the years and it doesn't work out so successfully. He found that winning formula, didn't he?
Absolutely. And I think, even on my show, Rise the Young, I started out writing down questions and trying to prepare. And I remember watching an early interview with Larry and the way he would cut people off and, continue the conversation without any questions written down was a testament to how great he was as a broadcaster. And I remember the day I watched that interview and I said, I will never write down a question again, and I will lead each conversation with curiosity. And it has paid off well for me. And like I said, it's a valuable lesson that I believe anyone watching this can take away, which is be curious about every single person you come in contact with. Make sure to learn something each conversation that you're having with another individual, whether it's in an interview or just in everyday life. And I know that lesson will forever stick with me.
That's really impressive. And it's an era going, isn't it? Because back then when there was limited outputs for celebrities or whatever to get their message out for those big primetime interview shows, Larry, striding away. But now you're an example. There's podcasts, there's so many other ways. That era of broadcasting seems to be changing.
Absolutely. And I asked Larry King, I said, how have you stayed relevant and on top of the game over the last 6 decades? And something that he told me, he said, I never followed the technology. I let the technology follow me. And I remember the first time that I met Chance King, his son, who I actually had dinner with, and my good friend Kieran O'Brien, he introduced me to him. And when we were talking, he talked about, technology and how his dad wanted to start a podcast and how he was always working on the next thing and how he was staying very motivated about his craft, which was broadcasting. And I think he's not only has taken huge steps in the broadcasting world, but he's inspired so many people all over the world, including myself, to focus on great interviews, to build a platform, to stay curious, but to most importantly, stay humble and love what you do. And that's what Larry definitely taught me.
Okay, Casey Adams, great to have you on. Good luck.